when we build our application, we're always going to need to decide what particular Android platform we want to support. And in reality, is what we're saying is, what API level do we want to support? Or another way to say that is, what's the minimum API level that we want to support whenever we build an application? And there's a few things to consider. So let's take a look first at all the versions and their API levels. Right? So this lists every Android version since its initial release and the corresponding API level up through the time I'm recording this video, which is May of 2013. Now you look at all that and it's like, well, geez, how do I decide, looking at that, what to support? Well, let's break it down in a couple ways. First of all, let's look at each of the major versions. Right, so version 1 was really the just getting started release of Android. Right? It really appealed to gadget-focused people. It wasn't really a broad consumer release. If we look at the 2.x versions, right, that was a much more user-friendly version of Android. It's really at the beginning of widespread consumer adoption. To give you kind of a sense of that, is that I've worked with Android from a developing standpoint going way back even before 1.0 came out with some of the pre-release stuff. But I never bought a phone as my primary phone that was an Android phone until 2.1 came out. Right? So it really was kind of a broad gap there, because it was really the 2.x and really kind of 2.1 is when consumers really started to kind of adopt Android. So then we have the Android 3 releases. That's kind of an odd release. It was a tablet-only release, meaning that it was a version of Android that only ran on tablets. It didn't support smartphones. So there was a period of time where if you bought a smartphone, it was going to be a 2-point something, but if you bought a tablet, it was going to be a 3-point something. And the reality is that the Android 3, I should say, had very low adoption rate. Not a lot of people bought devices that ran that. So if you kind of look at it so far, as it's kind of 1 was kind of just the beginning, 2 was where it really started to get traction, 3 is kind of this idea off to the side, but it's actually 4 is where Android took the next big jump. I mean, that's kind of the world we're living at the time of recording this. 5 will come out probably sometime in the next several months is the expectation, but right now the 4 is really kind of where it's at. 4 was the first version of Android that one version of the OS could support both tablets and phones. It was also a major re-architecting of the user interface. There were new UI components added to the platform. There were new ways of developing to make UIs more flexible and more interactive. All that was added with the Android 4 release and kind of evolved, of course, with that. So that's really kind of where your powerhouse is in terms of Android right now. So now as we kind of work through our list, the one of the things you'll find is if you look at the usage of Android versions, at each level, Android 1, Android 2, Android 3, and Android 4, there are versions that kind of either gone away altogether or even went away very quickly. Okay? In the Android 1 family, pretty much everything except 1.6 is gone. We're really down. That's the only one left of Android 1. Now, in the Android 2 family, 2.0 and 2.01, those went away really quickly. In fact, not very many phones released with those at all. And even the ones that did very quickly were updated to the newer ones. Right? 2.1 is where a lot of people started to get involved. If you look at the tablet release, the Android 3 family, the only one really left there is 3.2. And if we look even at Android 4, that first, the 4.0, 4.01, and 4.02, again, there really aren't any phones out there running those right now. Okay, so that's pared the list down quite a bit. So now you look at all that and you say, okay, well, I've narrowed it down from 17 choices to about 9 choices there now, but still, how do I make the decision? Well, the decision really comes down to what features you want your application to have access to and how much of the Android user base do you want to reach. Now, of course, you'd love to have every feature Android has, and you'd love to reach every user. That's not possible. So we need to look at what our options are. So if we look at the usage right now, basically, if you want to support API level 15, or another way to say is that you want to be in the Android 4 releases, you can reach 55.9% of all Android users out there right now if you target that API level 15. So that gives you that's a pretty good reach. I mean, based on the numbers, the estimated numbers for Android devices out there right now, 55.9% is on the order of 400 to 500 million devices, or 400 to 500 million users. That's a pretty good number. So you really want to target all that 4 stuff, get a good reach. API level 15 is a good choice. Now you go, well, maybe I want to get those tablet folks too, the folks who bought that tablet-only version of the OS. right? Well, you notice that there's only 0.1% of all Android devices in operation right now that run Android 3.2. Right? Now, keep in mind that, be careful, people running 4.0 and above can have tablets as well, right? Because remember, 4 supported both tablets and phones. But if you look at these numbers, the folks who are running, the tablets that are on the 3.2 level, to me, it's probably not worth pursuing them. Right? You're just not, the extra work you have to do and the features you give up to pick up 0.1% of the users, probably not worth it. But now if we say that, well, let's look at the 2.33.2, through 2.37 Android, right? Well, that's API level 10, and that would give us 94.4% of all the Android users out there. Now, that's a pretty good number, right? Again, using the current estimates of roughly 900 million total phones out there running Android, that would give us over 800 million users. Yeah, that's a pretty good user base. So that's a good one to target. Now, if we were to go up to API level 7, right, we would get to 99.9% of all Android phones out there. There's a pretty big jump, though, in features between 2.1 and the 2.33 family, so that's something to consider. And if you want to get everybody, you've got to go back to Android 1.6 or API level 4. But again, notice that you only picked up another 0.1% of all users out there. So with that consideration in mind, at this time, I'd recommend that you kind of make one of two choices. If you really want to build the richness and everything that Android currently supports, targeting API level 15 gives you that really good shot, right? It gives you all the great stuff that's in Android 4, and you're reaching a lot of users. If you're interested in reaching the broadest level of users possible and willing to give up some features to get there, I would say that API level 10 is really a spot to go to. You could make an argument for API level 7, but as I've worked through the different versions, I find 2.33 is really a good version. Now, the thing is that I'm making these recommendations, right? But these recommendations are based on the current time, right? May 2013. Well, if you're watching this 6 months from now, or a year from now, or even if you're not watching it, you're working all the time in Android, it gets to be 2018. Well, you can't use this chart anymore, right? Because the numbers will have changed substantially. So the question is, how do you make that decision at any point in time? How do you decide what's the right API level for you? Here I am on the Android developer site, right? developer.android.com. And what I'm going to do is go over to this menu over here on the right. And you notice that there is a About Android choice. I'm going to go and choose that. And on this About page, you'll notice there's a Dashboards option down here on the left. When I click on that, notice what this has. It has a list of platform versions and their distributions. In other words, what percentage of devices are running each of these versions. And it even gives you a date of when it's good through. In this case, it's May 1st, 2013. And Google does this constantly. Every couple of weeks, they release an updated version of this chart that tells you what the device distribution is. And what they're actually doing is that Google keeps statistics on every Android phone that connects to the Google Play Store. And they note the operating system version and API level of that particular phone. So they're able to put together for us a very accurate chart on what the the device distributions are, right? Because in order to put any applications on your Android device, you have to go to Google Play. So Google Play knows what phones are really out there. So I really encourage you to use this often. Whenever you're building your applications, go out here, see what the distribution of devices are, and ask that question of what features do I want, how much reach do I want, balance those out, and then choose the right API level that gives you that balance of features and user reach.